Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. In way of introduction, my name is Donna Bales, and I will be your host today. I'm the co-founder of the Canadian Regulatory Technology Association. Our mandate is to bring together key stakeholders within the ecosystem, the regulators, the financial institutions, and the RegTech firms. Our goal is to elevate the level of conversation on key regulatory challenges and to match them with solutions that are available in the marketplace from market data vendor, RegTech vendors. But our ultimate goal is to elevate the level of efficiency within the Canadian market ecosystem. Today's panel is a little off piece from the types of programs that we normally put forward, but we wanted to recognize International Women's Day. So we thought, what better way is that to bring together four phenomenal women who have some incredible journeys and achievements and insights to share with you today. Technology is a part of every day of our lives right now. We've seen an acceleration in the use of technology due to COVID. I know for the CRTA, we've seen a boost in membership last spring because the RegTech vendors were anticipating increased digitization and automation within the financial institutions. But these transformation initiatives cannot happen without strong leaders. And today we have four amazing, great leaders to walk you through their personal journeys. We want this webinar to be very interactive. So please send your questions in. We're going to have a few polling questions. So please don't hesitate to send the questions in throughout the webinar. So I'm just going to briefly introduce all the panelists today, and then we'll get them to provide a more fulsome introduction. So we have Deana Djurdjevic from she was Chief Administrative Officer at the Ontario Securities Commission. Dominique Payette, who is a lawyer in regulatory affairs at the National Bank of Canada. Eleanor Morrison, who is an MD in credit and market risk, technology risk at TD Securities. And I'm Okonny, who is a Chief Data Officer at Employment and Social Development Canada. So to kick off today's panel, I just wanted you all to start by giving us an overview of your personal career path. Whether you start at the beginning and end at what you're doing today or the other way around, just walk us through some of the jobs and responsibilities you've had throughout your career. So Eleanor, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start at the very beginning. Or not the very beginning, but the beginning of my career journey. I didn't know what I wanted to do out of high school, so I decided to take engineering because you graduate as an engineer, therefore you are an engineer and you'd find a job as such, and started my career at DuPont as a chemical engineer in Eastern Ontario. It allowed me to revisit many of my textbooks that I used in engineering. If the poor advice I had of don't worry, you'll never see it again after you graduate, did not impact. I've used everything I've learned in school in my career at some point afterwards, and so brushed up on my textbooks, certainly in that job. And this job, as well as the co-op engineering terms that I did at Waterloo, really set the foundation for my career because I have spent most of my career in a non-diverse work environment. Less so today than I certainly did back then, but I had that foundation right in my education program rather than arriving at it in a material workspace afterwards. After 3 years at DuPont, I decided to do what many engineers at the time in Canada do. You go back and you do an MBA. I chose to do mine in finance out at UBC in Vancouver. And when I graduated, it was actually at the inflection point of natural gas and electricity deregulating across North America, but more materially in the United States. And so I joined a subsidiary of BC Hydro, which is the government-owned utility out there, to build a trade floor. There were 4 of us, and we wore lots of different hats, and started to build that out. They already were doing a little bit of real-time trading, a little bit of trading, sharing of electricity for the next day, all in Excel spreadsheets at the time. And so one of my first tasks was to build or implement a front-to-back trading system for them, which was a wonderful opportunity because I knew nothing about trading or trade floors. And so this was the right way to learn about front, middle, back office functionality, and also worked with a vendor that had the functionality, but much of it was under development. And so I did a very close working relationship with the technology there. They were based in New York, which also gave me an opportunity to travel to New York, which shows up later in my career as opening that door to think of the possibilities of leaving Canada for work outside of the country. One thing that's interesting, I guess, as Donna was asking us to reflect on our career journeys, I thought back to the interview process to work on this very, very small trade floor as we built it out for the utility. And one of the comments by one of the senior executives tasked with building the floor was, well, you better, watch out. The language is kind of colorful on the trade floor. The traders are a rough and tumble bunch. And I took note of the advice, but didn't really know what to do with it. Subsequently, he did not know my background of working in outdoor chemical plants in Northern Ontario with machine operators. I can say that the traders were quite a lovely, foul-languaged group of people, but certainly not the most challenging I've run into my career. So today, would that comment be made? Probably not, but certainly was highlighted back then. After implementing the system, and for those in technology, you need an out plan because you don't want to be the expert on that system. I became the portfolio manager and trader for the utility, and basically trade the surplus assets, electricity that the utility had, and worked on a prop trading book at the same time. This was back in the California energy crisis, for those that remember that time, and it actually has very similar parallels to what we're seeing today in terms of the financial repercussions, the policy and regulatory politics that unfortunately are going on based on what happened in Texas this past month at that time as well. I moved to New York shortly after spending about 4 years on this trade floor. What prompted the move? One, to know that it was possible out there, that I actually worked in the market, talked to brokers that were based in New York, and thought, well, why not see if that's an avenue? My boss also had just turned 40 at the time and was going nowhere, so I didn't see an opportunity for progression within that company, and so took the opportunity and found work in New York, first with Merrill Lynch, which was my string of my American investment bank experiences, the majority with Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, and always doing the same function as an energy trader, sitting in front office for large client transactions, but also prop trading as well for them. Lehman moved me over to London to build out their global energy franchise, and that's what allowed me to move off the continent, if you will, into yet another new environment for me, being based in the London office, and enjoyed that very much as well. After 10 plus years in this business, things changed. Margins condensed. There was more competition because energy was seen and was a very attractive place to be. And so decided it was time for a hiatus. And so I retired from banking and worked on built a small consulting business, first looking at putting energy assets into structured products, but that quickly migrated, because this is post 2008, to regulations. Energy and financial regulations is what I focused my small business on for a good number of years at that time. Throughout my career, I've always appreciated the access to education and going back and refreshing my knowledge and education and teaching others. And I'm a firm believer that if you have the capacity and the interest, teaching others is a rewarding. I found a very rewarding capacity. And so as I started up the consulting business, in parallel, I started teaching part-time, lecturing and master's programs in Paris, where I decided to be based. In anything under the finance umbrella, whether it was valuation, M&A, derivatives, foreign exchange, the whole gamut, which was really interesting because it gave me the opportunity to learn more outside of the pure energy and rate space that I had done in my career. At the same time, I realized the value of data, the access to data, and the cost of access to data when you're sitting in a small consulting company. And I had lots of different ideas I wanted to research in my own interests, certainly with clients as well. And so I decided, why not try and pursue a PhD that would give me an access to data channel, as well as an opportunity to explore some of the research interests that I had. And so started on a journey of my PhD, literally at the same time my two small young children arrived. You have to leap at opportunities and kind of balance what rides on your plate. And so really enjoyed, well, I'm not going to say I enjoyed the balancing the young children PhD, but the PhD journey in isolation, I very much enjoyed that process and spent most of my time in there researching debt asset pricing under volatile conditions and hedge scenarios. And so that personal interest has become certainly useful, continues to be useful as I build on the various education journeys that I've had. The PhD allowed me to stretch my quant skills in a different area on model building. And I can honestly say, probably for the first time in my life, I learned to write. I learned to write a proper sentence, a paragraph, a document. And that, if I reflect on the PhD, that was probably the most challenging journey, was the writing piece of it. Just over 2 years ago, for family reasons, we decided to relocate to Canada with our small children. That we really we're happy to be here. We're enjoying it very much. And interestingly, I've come full circle in some respects. I'm back into banking. I'm back into technology. I'm enjoying very much. I lead the risk technology systems at TD Securities, and it's a really interesting job. I'm loving it. It's a really interesting time. There's lots going on in the technology space. Lots of new analytics that we want to build on technology. And so I'm enjoying it very much. One of the comments Donna made at the start, is how these journeys impact us and our various opportunities. The theme for me is keep learning, and where you can, engage others and do some teaching at the same time. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah, wonderful. Eleanor, you have such a diverse background. It's very inspiring, just for being in technology and the risk, and then that pivot into education. I think I totally agree with you in the terms of the learning aspect is so important, and to continue to learn. Ima, can we go over to you, and because you've had a slightly different journey, like whereas Eleanor's been in many places, you've sort of stayed in mainly with the government, I think,
Yes.
in different roles. Maybe you could walk us through, because you've had many different roles, right?
Exactly. I mean, Eleanor, your story was very interesting. Thank you for sharing and your passion around learning. I think is excellent insight there. So, Donna, yes, I've been in the public service for the last 21 years. February marked 21 years, my 21-year anniversary. But I felt that it shifted rapidly over the last 20 years. My roles have changed over the years. But you know what? I'll start from the beginning, because you said we could start from the beginning or the end. So I'll go back to the beginning. So in terms of the beginning, so I came from a family that was very academic. So academic father who kind of taught us the value that, as long as you worked hard, focused, put your energy in what you needed to do, you could achieve basically anything you put your mind to. So I grew up with the concept that, work hard, focus, go for what your goals are. And as a child, I was actually really, really good at writing. I loved writing. I wrote a lot. And my father was more, you need to focus on the sciences. So the way I got into the science world and math and all that was that I remember one time in school, the teacher had asked us to write a piece on somebody, our hero, like hero, heroine, somebody that you admired. And then I had read about Marie Curie, the physicist, and I just loved her story. I found her story very fascinating. So I did a lot of research. I then wrote about her and her story and how she won the Nobel Prize and all the discoveries she made. And she kind of became my inspiration in terms of getting into the mathematical world and the physical world and all that. So my first attempt at university basically was physics. I wanted to have a physics degree. I wanted to study the sciences and I wanted to invent something. And I started there and then pivoted into mathematics because there were some close links in mathematics. So my educational background was in mathematics, computer programming. And one of the things I really enjoyed was data. So right from university, I remember the first go at the AdventureWorks database and looking at the patterns and the trends. And looking back, what I see really drew me to data was the power to tell stories. Like you can really tell some valuable stories with data about people and about policy and about the way we see things as humans, because everything we do is reflected in the data, basically. So that was kind of my first interest in data. So I entered into the work world where I started in Canada Revenue Agency. And I started as a clerk, basically. I started as a clerk, and my first job was really helping some of our pay advisors. So there was this massive conversion of the pay system. And I basically helped our pay analysts to make sure that people were getting paid right. And one thing, as I look back to those days, one thing that really impressed me was the thoroughness. Like the pay advisors, they were very thorough in terms of making sure that people were getting their correct pay. And with the skills I had learned, I could help them do that and enable them do that. So one thing I learned from that job was the value of people. Like you had to make sure you were telling the right stories with data. Because if we weren't telling those right stories as we did these calculations, you were impacting people's lives and their ability to pay their bills and their ability to support their families. So that value kind of grew up with me as I grew up with data through the years. And I worked in different departments. Like I worked in Statistics Canada also, where we worked on the census, looking at the under coverage of the census, looking at different populations across Canada, and looking at how we could really enable some of the policy departments to make decisions around people. And then after that, I moved to Employment and Social Development Canada, worked in the Canada Student Loan Program, where again, we were looking at people and how to do policy forecasting to support students across Canada. And after that, I had a 9-year stint at immigration. So immigration was another interesting department because some people would say, well, what are you doing with data in immigration? But it was very powerful work around looking at forward-looking policy, looking at how we could really bring in skills to support the labor market, looking at how we could help people across the world when they were in crisis. Like when we had the Syrian issue, I was in immigration, and we had to do a lot of projections to immediately support people across the world and bring them to Canada to support them. And then also in terms of sponsorships, like you have Canadians who also live abroad, and there are like growing number of sponsorships happening. So part of our work was to also look at this story of the transitions of people, from temporary status to permanent status, and just to be able to really tell the story around how we're bringing in people, how people are integrated into this country, and how we build a stronger Canada. So that was that was another interesting aspect of my job. And then moving on to OSFI, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, where I was for 2.5 years. And the focus there was on really looking at data management from all the data we collected from the institution. So again, another very interesting job in terms of looking at how we could use data to assess risk and to really make sure that we were able to meet the mandate there. And then now, a year ago, I joined Employment and Social Development Canada, where I'm the Chief Data Officer. And in this role, I've said this many times, I think ESDC has one of the most powerful and the most beautiful mandates I've seen. Our mandate is basically to help all Canadians. And this role I find is extremely important in terms of making sure that we're able to leverage data to get Canadians to the best outcomes they need to get to. And this became very evident during COVID-19, which we're still dealing with, in terms of really getting Canadians the support they need, at the right time. And then also using data to examine supports and policy changes and programs as we look at recovery and, the future of work, digitization, digital transformation, and the implications of all these technological changes on Canadians and the workforce. So all this to say that as I look back, I'm connecting the dots backwards. My purpose in my career has become more evident, in terms of really using some of these skills I have grown and the people I have worked with to really support and help others with data. And I find that extremely rewarding, because there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of very intentional work that also has to happen around data, especially when we start looking at some of the issues around vulnerability, around bias, around ethics, and how we as people can really use data for good and really supporting people who are underserved across the country. So that's kind of a summary, high-level summary, but definitely looking forward to more conversations and questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Emma, perfect. And we were going to go back to that question around data for social good, because I think there's a lot we can talk about there, but wonderful background as well, very diverse. Dominique, are you frozen?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Eleanor and Emma. That is very, very inspiring to hear. Your paths are wonderful and so sound so fulfilling. So I thank you for having me, Donna. It's a great pleasure. I'm a lawyer at National Bank of Canada, but I've had I currently practice technology and privacy law at the bank. As you can imagine, financial institutions are very much getting into usage of data and the technology to kind of better serve clients, better manage risk, etc. But I was never I was a even being from my generation, I didn't have a cell phone until really late. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't buy in the whole tech movement when I was younger. And going to law school is very based on you have to go work at a big firm and you have to litigate and you see the on suits, it's very focalized on that. And so I thought that's what I had to do. So for a couple of years after my bachelor's, I litigated in a firm and I was miserable. It's, very negative, very confrontational. And so I quit that after 2 years because I felt it wasn't for me. Although I really liked the law, I didn't like the setting of litigation and working in a firm. And so I went back to school to do my common law degree because I'm based out of Quebec. So I did, the law degree for the rest of Canada. And I added a master's paper. A bit like Eleanor mentioned, I like to learn constantly. And at that point, I was close to 30, but I wanted to add something to my course. And I was asking around, what should I write about? I want to write about something concrete. You know, I want to make myself marketable, and I want to be also useful. And everyone was telling me fintech at the time. So I wrote a paper on the regulation of robo-advisors. So the use of tech to kind of make financial advice more accessible and less costly. So that's where I got kind of the bug, and I became really fascinated with how tech was influencing law and the financial industry. So when I got to work at the bank, even though when I got hired, I was working on commercial finance stuff, but it was 4 years ago, and it was right when the tech departments and all that was blooming, and because of my interest, I started to peek around and ask questions to our AI group and became close to them. I developed a legal chatbot with them to kind of answer easy legal questions internally, and that's where I kind of got to learn a little bit more about the technology itself. And I started to advocate at the bank about AI ethics. I believe in technology. I think it could bring a lot of good to the world, but it has to be used responsibly in order to do so. So I started to advocate a lot about AI ethics. I saw the movement coming as it was, and so slowly it became a part of my job to lead those discussions at the bank. And I've also tried to keep us like a foot in academia. Again, the learning part is important for me, and so I just published an article on fairness in AI credit models in banking. So I actually applied Canadian equality rights to kind of give a concrete meaning to fairness in our operations. And I also stay involved with the community a lot. So startup community, student community, where I try to make people sensitive to these issues. The younger generation are going to have, these duties to kind of use technology responsibly. So I try to stay involved to kind of help with that. I think that sums it up for me. You're on mute.
You've also helped us with our paper on AI and responsible use of AI and building out automated systems. But if you haven't, I think maybe we can share the paper around that you did to the attendees, because it was excellent on the work that you did on the credit and fairness models.
Gladly.
Yeah, you'll probably like it. It's very good, a very good read. Deana, let's go over to you.
Thanks, Donna.
We've had parallel lives a little bit, you and I, so I'm going to do a lot of head nodding.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to listen to such amazing careers. It's just like fascinating what people get to do through their lives. So thank you for sharing that. I like Eleanor, I started off as an electrical engineer specifically back in what was then Yugoslavia, and then I immigrated to Canada, hoping to continue pursuing an academic career. And then I came here and realized that the world is a bit different here, that you need to work and earn the money and kind of go into corporate world. And I never ended up going back to the academic career. So spent the first number of years in software development, and I really enjoyed it. And very early on, I landed in the financial industry, because in Toronto, that's the big industry that kind of swallows all the talent. It was really lucky through those first years to end up in an organization called Versus Technologies, for those of you who remember, which later on became E-Trade Canada and was acquired by Scotia in the end, which was an incredibly innovative leader in the brokerage technology space at the time. It was the nicest little company I ever worked with, 150 people, with 3 different business models interweaving in a very interesting way. where we developed some really innovative trading technologies at the time. I wasn't even aware how ahead of the times it was at the time, because I was just young. What do I know? Like, that's what it looks like. It's only looking back that I fully appreciate how visionary the leaders were at the time. But through that job, I started appreciating the business side more and more of the whole capital markets and the equity trading, and then who the players are and how the whole system works. And I was lucky that at that time, when my career was really being shaped, that the demand for people who could bridge the gap between the business needs and technology enablement was really trying to grow. So I think less than 10 years in the technology roles, I moved on into business leadership roles, and then moved on from that, and had some really great opportunities to work for great companies and on great initiatives. Maybe a highlight, I spent a number of years working at the Toronto Stock Exchange as head of equity trading business. And this is the time when and Donna would reflect on this probably, when the trading really started being measured in nanoseconds, and then we moved away from humans trading to computers trading, and from trading on one exchange to interconnected messaging among multiple exchanges, multiple countries. Like, it was really real-time messaging got a whole new meaning through that process. It was a fascinating business domain, because any competitive edge for the clients of the stock exchange or for the stock exchange itself all came from innovation and technology and data. Like, that's where all the changes and the development are happening. So really interesting. And I worked in many different organizations, and I like to highlight this because I really value that. I worked in small startup companies. I ended up working in a number of large, well-established companies. I had my own consulting business for a number of years. I spent most of the times in the private sector, and then recently, about 3 years ago, I ventured into the public sector. And it's really this cross intersection of all these experiences that is really so fulfilling, and it allows me to be an effective leader today, and to really kind of draw on multiple experiences to try and disentangle whatever problem I'm working on any given time. So most recently, I joined the Ontario Securities Commission a little over a year ago as the Chief Administrative Officer. And it's a broad mandate, but part of the mandate is really to ensure that technology enables the innovation in the business of regulation. So not only do we need to, as a regulator, be able to follow the industry, which is changing as rapidly as ever, and it's mostly fueled by technology enablement, but also how regulators around the world perform the business of regulation needs to change, and technology is the key, really incremental change that's happening lately to change how we all approach that. So really enjoying that. Working with some lovely people. I love working in Toronto. Like, I've been working here basically most of my career, and I say it feels like high school alumni. We all kind of work in different organizations, but we all really work for the same thing. It's so lovely. I miss the downtown badly. I miss walking and seeing all the people I know. And it's so nice to meet you all, and I can't wait to see you all in person somewhere. Share a beer or coffee.
I know. I mean, that it's that buzz. I think we're all missing it. It'll be good to finally do a live event at the CRTA. So hopefully soon. Well, thank you so much. I know we spent a bit of time on the introductions, but I thought it was important because these women have had such long, diverse, really interesting careers, and you can see that we've touched on education, we've touched on the full circle of starting from one pot and ending up at the same spot again, which I think is good. And then that whole intersection that Deana talked about in terms of that cross information and how you can really be strong and inspire others when you've got that full view. So let's dig into some questions a little bit more in terms of did you have any? Actually, you know what? I'm going to stop and take a question from the audience before I get my hand slapped, because we have quite a few. There's a couple questions here. One for Eleanor. How has your learning style changed with COVID and working from home?
Great question. So my learning style has been online in nature, which certainly I guess, allows some flexibility that we didn't think of before. And so certainly, I think actually COVID has given probably more of us the opportunity to learn because it is online. There's more programs that are being put online. And so in that respect, both in a personal sense or a professional sense, I think there are ample opportunities out there to learn in this COVID type environment. If I put my other hat on as a teacher or a lecturer, that's been a much more challenging experience because I'm teaching at the master's level. We normally are in person. The expectations, the challenges around that really has made me put my thinking cap on how to make it a fruitful, open, engaging dialogue. But on the learner side of it, I think there's so many different programs out there that now we have access to because of the increase in online.
Thanks, Eleanor. We have actually a lot of questions, so I'm going to, and rather than someone else opine on that, I'm going to move a little bit. Dominique, you have a question. Are you able to comment about what is different between dealing on privacy and AI with Quebec in contrast to the federal government?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. It's a bit tough to answer, but it's a great question. So as a financial institution, we're kind of bound by the two, and as I think the person asking the question is aware that right now there's a bill to kind of revamp and make more stringent the privacy obligations, both at the provincial Quebec level and the federal level, and we have to kind of deal with both all at the same time. I would say that my comment would be that, so they are both based on the GDPR. My instinct and from what I've seen of both is that the federal one is more it's more adapted. It's more risk-based and makes a little bit more sense business-wise. You kind of get the sense that they kind of consulted the whole ecosystem. The Quebec one is a good bill as well, but some of the obligations are a bit tougher to understand. However, I think they're both great like step forwards with respect to privacy. But we're definitely, as you can imagine, it's like I'm not going to surprise anybody. We're asking both government to try to harmonize a little bit more. And I think Eleanor works for TD. We all of us, even if TD is based in Toronto, TD has operations in Quebec. And so all of us institutions that work Canada-wide need to kind of deal with all these obligations. So harmonization is something that we ask for.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique. I know that this is a little off piece and more like one of our normal discussions that we'd have through the CRTA, like talking about a specific issue, or maybe we'll have you back to talk about privacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm a question for you. What advice do you have for creative thinkers in the traditionalist structured finance industry?
Good question. I would say it's a balance, and it goes back to some of what was said. And I think by Deana, I think you mentioned this in terms of working closely with the business to figure out what exactly the problem is. Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Through the years, what I have found is the need to really zero in precisely on the problem we're trying to solve, as opposed to creating an innovative thing for the reason of creating an innovative thing. So through my career, I've had to think very creatively, because as you know, the whole data domain is still emerging. Like, it's still emerging, things are changing every day. And to be able to enable some of the work in terms of really looking at future projections and enabling decision-making and analysis around risk. One has to continue to be innovative to really get at some of those burning issues and burning questions. So my advice would be that whatever you're trying to do around creativity, innovation, anchor it around the gaps. Like, what gap are you trying to fill? What business need? What is the burning need you're trying to fill? Because that makes it a lot easier to continue to be innovative. The challenge I often see is when people come up with an idea, for example, that's not really tied to any specific business need or business gap, then it becomes a challenge to try to anchor it in something, especially in an industry, but basically in any organization that has to deal with several constraints, you know. So we're in all these organizations that have to deal with constraints because we have to be accountable to numerous people. Like in the public service, we're accountable to Canadians. So in terms of what we're doing in terms of innovation, we have to make sure that it's ethical and we're not leaving anybody out in our processes around innovation, be it digital transformation, data transformation, looking at digitization. We always have to make sure that we're considering all the constraints as we build out. So my suggestion would be to always anchor it in the gaps. Like, what gap are you trying to fill? What is the business need you're trying to fill? And how connected is this to making things better for your clients, your customers, for Canadians? When you're in these organizations with these constraints, you need to go back to that default position. That is what I would suggest.
Okay, thank you, Anna. We have a lot of questions, and we haven't actually gone through our program a bit, so I'm going to go through a few of the questions that we wanted to share with you today, and then we can go back to the Q&A. You can see from these questions that people are very eager to get your view, and they see you as a role model. So I'd like to actually turn to that topic just by first having a poll with the audience. In terms of role models. So we have a question prepared. So if we could just ask the audience, do you have a role model or mentor to help you navigate your career? Yes, I have a female role model. I have a male role model. I have many role models, male and female. I do not have a role model. So we'll come back to the answer on that. And then maybe, Deana, we could start with you. How about yourself? Have you got a role model that you've had, or many, throughout your career?
Many. Yeah. And they better stay there. I was thinking as we're getting ready, like really, I think my whole life is the tapestry of the other people's influences, and I hope it stays like that. And many of them are women, and I was thinking about, was that natural or how it come to be? But starting off with my mother, who was always like reaching for more and teaching me to reach for more, whether it's in personal life or career, and I took that for granted. Now again, looking back, it's not everyone's style, but it certainly shaped how I approach my life. Then I had this amazing university professor who became a family friend later on, who is a great academic and a political activist who kind of open up the world of work for me, like what does a career mean, and how you can blend a personal family life with some really big important roles outside of your personal life. And so to this day, she's 75, very active, and we stay very close. And then here in Canada, in the capital markets, like many women really charted my course and helped me get through and inspired me to move through. And like, I hope I don't want to miss or skip anyone, but Colleen Moorhead comes to mind. She was a big career in brand.
With Gandhi.
There you go. And she really, I had the opportunity to work with her in 2 different organizations. She recently published the book, The Collective Wisdom of High Performing Women. She's a co-founder of the Djurdjevic Project, which is a program that designed to help women embrace ambition. Like, she's a super active, inspired woman that is so comfortable saying as it is, and just like such an amazing influencer. Maureen Jensen, she's the past chair of the Ontario Securities Commission, one of the first leaders in Canada to call on corporate Canada to really make gender diversity a priority. Like really had an interesting career going from being a geologist all the way to being a top regulator without being a lawyer herself, which is a fascinating career. And then many other come to mind: Judith Robertson, Anne-Marie Ryan, Finola Martin. I don't know, for anyone in the capital market circles, I would assume you know all these names. And I stay in touch with all of them continually, and I draw inspiration from them. And they all really believed in me more than I did in different points in time, and encouraged me to go for things that I was maybe shy of or not really sure. And it meant the world throughout my career. And even now, whenever I'm faced with any kind of challenging situation, especially if I'm facing some sort of aggression of maybe a male-dominated environment, I would channel one of them in my head, like, what will she do? And just like this voice comes from me, and I like look stronger, and I go through the challenge. And so really like having this network of mentors, and it's not only women. Many men have been great partners and great supporters of me throughout my career. And I'm now looking to find ways to play the same role for some other younger up and coming women, and really show them whatever I can to help them get through. So
yeah. Yeah, and Ima, you actually, you do a lot on the conference circle talking about, diversity and inclusion. And, I think you talked back to Carleton University. You've done many things. Are there any insights that you can share with the group in terms of, maybe some of the messages that you convey when you're out speaking?
Yeah, I mean, through the years, one of the things I've learned is a lot of it has to do with the messages we receive. I talked about it like as a kid. My father told me you can do whatever you need to, like you can go out there, pursue your goals, and then you get into the job market and the school system, and you're told, hey, you're a girl, or you're like this, so you can't achieve this. You can't do mathematics because you look this way, or you can't be here because you look this way. And these are some of the messages one gets as you move through your career. And part of the challenge is how you self-reflect and ensure you're not internalizing a lot of those messages, because those messages can sabotage your career, So part of it is, as all of us on this panel have reached a certain level of leadership and influence, it's incumbent upon us too to be able to reach back and ensure that we're also helping in terms of the messages we send out to other people that are behind us, and in terms of how we can influence our organizations in terms of bringing in that diverse perspective and inclusive perspective, because often we focus on the diversity as opposed to ensuring that we're being diverse and inclusive. Because another thing I find is, to be inclusive, you have to be very intentional, and it is a journey in learning, ongoing self-reflection, understanding your biases. We all have biases. I have biases, and part of it is how do we continually remain curious to learn and be open and transparent in terms of acknowledging that we have biases, and we have to make sure that we're not propagating these biases in some of our practices in the workplace. So, I mean, I'm very big in terms of myself, in terms of asking myself every day what biases I have, and then what messages I'm propagating to others to make sure that I, as a person and as a leader, remain inclusive and ensure that in my organization and in my practices, I am being fair, and ensuring that as we look at data too, we're doing the best we can to represent the interests of all Canadians across Canada.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. That's very insightful. I'm just going to share the results from the polling question. And interesting enough, 50% of the group do not have a role model. So I think we'll all agree that it's really important. And I think certainly for myself, it's helped me navigate some very difficult times. So whether that's male or female or both, I think it's really important to look for someone to help lead the way and navigate through difficult times. So we don't have much time left. So I'm just thinking, in terms of, we talked a little bit about some, your backgrounds, and we're kind of seeing that there's a lot of change going on, a lot more use of data. There's some things that we need to keep, and there's the bias risk that Dominique talked about and Emma talked about. But there's also just, culturally, being inclusive. Could we talk a little bit about what areas and focus areas that we think that we can, as a group, can focus on in order to raise awareness and to improve diversity and inclusion within our work environments and within Canada more broadly? Eleanor, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So I sit in technology at the bank, and I would say at the bank level, diversity and inclusion are there. We certainly have it in technology, but we have a diversity challenge still. We can do a lot better there. And so there's a couple of ways that we look at doing it. One, to try and look at the pipeline of talent and ensure it's diverse that we're interviewing. If the pipeline of talent is not diverse, how can we be leaders and help drive the ability for that pipeline to become more diverse? And this is getting into the universities or into the high schools and sending that message and trying and perhaps creating an environment where we have some folks that are role models for others coming up. And so it's a constant, we talk about it all the time. We push it when a job is advertised. If we don't see a diverse candidate pool, we ask why is there not a diverse candidate pool, and push to try and encourage that and understand why in fact it is not and what the drivers are.
Deana, do you want to add a little bit onto that? What are you seeing in terms of where we need to move within Canada?
Well, the challenges in front of us, some are easier to measure, some are more difficult to measure, but I think we all know what we have to do, and then it's really encouraging to see the movement that we're seeing on all fronts, and it seems like corporate Canada is really focused this time around. Mm-hmm. I can speak specifically, at the OSC, we're very, very committed to the cause. Being a government agency, and since we regulate disclosure standards for public companies in Ontario, we always try to lead by example and make sure that we have the proper diversity in our ranks. And our objective is to eventually represent the Ontario, the province that we serve in terms of our composition. But I think Emma said this, diversity is the outcome. Inclusion is really what makes it happen. And inclusion is so much harder to achieve. And in our dominantly action-oriented culture where we want to get to action really quickly, this one doesn't come naturally because we have to slow down, we have to listen and embrace. And so I know we at the OSC, we're developing a very comprehensive strategy with external subject matter experts to help us really listen internally, listen externally, and develop the full understanding that's required to build an inclusive environment. So when we actually bring in diverse talent, they actually can flourish and grow and become the leaders of tomorrow. We've been committed at the OSC at gender diversity for a long time, and we have achieved excellent numbers. We had 60% gender female leaders at the executive level, and I think 43 at the board level, so it's quite remarkable. And I don't have the latest stats, but I think all of our staff is about 50-50. So this is the first time I'm working in an organization that has such dominant, like such equal representation. And it does feel different. Like it is a different kind of dynamic. It's phenomenal, and we can only imagine how much world better would be if we had the other diversity aspects properly represented. but a long path to go from here.
Yeah, do you really see that diversity of thought, like from other organizations where the balance may not have been as even?
I can certainly, well, I think that always is a phenomenal organization, so this has to contribute to its excellent results. But the way decisions are made, the way the dynamic of conversations, the willingness to listen, it is different than in your typical male-dominated kind of high-energy environment. So it is just different, and the results are excellent.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, this webinar has flown by, and we have so many questions. We're going to have to ask the audience that we can maybe follow up after. And we've had such a there's certainly some interest in the to you, Deana, about the your view on cryptocurrencies, which is interesting, which came up. So I think that's maybe a time for another type of session. But let's end it maybe just going quickly around the group and just saying, where do you think we need to go from here? Just maybe just some closing words, and just from each one of you on kind of what are the next steps. Like for International Women's Day, the theme this year is change for challenge, and the challenge they're asking everybody is how can we help forge a gender equal world? And if you everybody just have a comment on that, that would be great. And then we'll end the session. Can we start with Deana?
Sure. Thank you, Donna. So I think, as I mentioned, very, very important to foster the culture of mentorship and really strive to improve the visibility of women in leadership positions. That is the beginning of the journey, and then things will come out of there. Organizations need to appreciate the importance, and so we need more data and more stats that shows how having gender diversity and other diversity really is benefiting businesses. So people need to buy into the results. And we as leaders, and we touched on that before, we have to cast a really wide net as we bring new talent into the organizations to make sure that we really bring on all kinds of diversities into the fold and let them go through a fully inclusive environment.
Okay, thank you. Dominique, you have a quick comment? We're almost at time.
My answer is going to focus on gender diversity because this is for International Women's Day, and I'm going to leverage what Ima said before about inclusion. So my profession has a bit the opposite, or maybe not the opposite, but a different problem because women have dominated law schools for a while now. However, they leave the profession. So leveraging on what Ima is saying, I think there needs to be more effort concentrating on the inclusion of women, whether it's concrete measures to accommodate lifestyle, but also culture shifts to kind of adapt to women taking more and more space in leadership roles.
Thank you. Ima, last few words.
So, I mean, I would echo what already has been said. I would say we need to break our echo chambers. Like we need to look at places we don't usually look at. We need to be more intentional in how we're including, how we're mentoring, how we're reaching out, how we're looking at intersectionality, because there's the gender issue, but there's so much intersectionality. When you look at women from different perspectives and lenses, there's a need to actually use a lot of the data we already have. We know what the problems are. COVID-19 has shown us who was most impacted by this, pandemic. So I think the question for a lot of us is, what are we going to do about it? And we have more power than we think. So we should all, put in some effort and intentionality into doing what we can, in our little ways. And I think there'll be change if we all focus on putting in some effort and intention into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ima. Eleanor, last few words.
Yeah. Identify the top talent women, promote them, and let's create those role models for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. It's been a really great session. I think we could have talked for hours, and we had many more questions planned. But hopefully we can get you back to another session for the CRTA. I want to thank everybody for joining today.